today we are going to make Carnivore Jello jigglers, or Aspic, which is gelatinized broth. The cool part about gelatinized broth is that it is the original Jello. The gelatin comes from cartilage, and this is a naturally occurring state. I have not used any gelatin packets for this. This is just 2 ingredients, water and meaty bones. Let's get to cooking. And by the way, totally worth the effort.
So we're going to start with braised oxtail because aspic is actually a byproduct of other dishes. First, I'm browning the oxtail. Then I will put it into the Instant Pot. Yes, I know I can brown it in the Instant Pot, but that only works if you don't have a large amount of stuff to brown. Otherwise, you run out of space and it just doesn't work. As a note, oxtail is my vastly preferred option for this. Not only is it absolutely delicious, but it's got a fantastic collagen content. You don't need to add anything else to the braise in order to make the broth gelatinous. Whereas with almost any other cut of meat, you're going to have to add in things like trotters or other things with a really high collagen content in order to get the aspic to form. So now that everything's browned and in the Instant Pot, I am actually going to be adding the juices from a previous braise from 2 days before, because this will intensify the flavor and it will also increase the collagen content and make a firmer aspic. I strongly recommend holding on to braised juices, whether or not you plan on making an aspic, because these are fantastic for making sauces or drinking or anything else you would use broth for. I cooked this on the meat setting, adding 5 minutes to the overall cook time, and then let the pressure release naturally for at least 30 minutes. This leaves you with fall off the bone tender meat and a very rich, lovely broth. After a delicious dinner of oxtail, I poured the broth into a container and chilled it overnight. As you can see, the fat separates on its own and you can just pop it off the top. This next step is clarifying the broth. This is a totally optional step. The benefit is only aesthetic and not nutritional.
While the gelatinized broth is liquefying and slowly coming up to heat, I'm going to beat 4 egg whites to add into this to make a raft to clarify the broth. Okay. So while the gelatinized broth is coming up to heat, I'm going to separate 4 eggs. I do want to clarify that when I say coming up to heat, I just mean getting it to a liquid point. It still needs to stay cool. So once things started to melt, I turned off the heat and I'm just letting the heat of the surrounding broth liquefy the rest of it. Now we're going to whisk until it's foamy. Okay, hopefully that's enough. It's supposed to be foamy, bubbly, but not stiff. Now I have almost entirely liquid gelatinized broth, and I'm going to pour in the foamy egg whites. I'm going to stir them in. Okay, so once it's thoroughly mixed in, and it's fairly uniform, I can't get the rest of it in, I'm going to put the heat onto a medium temperature. Some stoves run a little hot. For that, I would put it on low. And I'm just going to keep stirring until it comes up to heat. And as it comes up to heat, the egg proteins should grab onto the bits of impurities within the broth and pull them all together. And then I can just skim them all out. Okay, so as I'm stirring, these clumps are starting to rise to the surface. And now I'm going to stop stirring to let them continue to rise. This is the formation of what is referred to as the raft, and what's happening is that the egg white protein is attaching itself to the impurities that it can actually grab onto, and as the egg cooks, the impurities and the egg white are rising to the top like a raft. So now as the raft is forming, I've turned the heat down to a lower temperature and I'm going to let it simmer and continue to cook for another 15 to 20 minutes. We're at about 10 minutes now, and as you can see, it's starting to look very different. We're going to go for another 5 or 10 minutes still. So as this raft continues to form, we've got bubbles coming through. I'm just going to open it up a little bit in the middle. Just to let some of the steam through. Okay, it has been a little bit over 20 minutes. I'm still seeing flakes, but that doesn't mean that the clarity of the broth isn't there. However, at this point, I'm fairly certain that the broth is fairly clear. So I've turned off the heat. It's still bubbling a little and simmering a little bit, but that will settle down. I'm going to give it about 5 minutes to let everything separate and cool down from this boiling, sort of simmering state, and for everything to settle and rise, etc. The raft has done its job, and I am moving aside the settled egg, and I will be ladling out the broth from the middle here. Now I've got a bowl with a sieve set up, and I will be ladling it through the sieve, just because I know I'm going to scoop up a little bit of egg white, and I know that I let this boil a little bit too high, and that means there will be a little bit of egg particle happening in the bottom. While I am going to make a plain aspic, I'm also going to make an aspic with shredded meat inside of it. And for that, I have 2 of the oxtails that I braised in order to get the gelatinized broth. And I'm just going to cook them until soft and shred them with a fork, the way I would for any other shredded meat. Okay, now I am poaching, or at least soft cooking, 2 eggs for the Oeuf en Gelee, which is egg and jelly. I will be cooking them until the whites are cooked and the yolks are still very soft. I've separated out the broth and I've got my molds prepared. This has the shredded beef, and this has 2 soft poached eggs, and this is empty. So this will be Boeuf en Gelee, this will be Oeuf en Gelee, and this will be just plain aspic. I'm also putting the remainder of the gelatinized broth into a loaf pan, just because I don't have enough molds for the full amount of broth that I have. I do want to call out that this is fantastic hot weather food, and we are having a heat wave coming in, which is one of the reasons that I decided to make this now. They are technically brioche loaves, but it's a silicone mold, and it will work beautifully for this. So the aspic is a little bit hot still, which is fine. So with this particular gelatinized broth, because it's made from oxtail, it will literally be solid enough to be considered, like, pick it up and eat it solid, basically. It's going to be fantastic. Tomorrow's going to be uncomfortably hot, and the carnivores in the house will very much enjoy having something cool to eat that is still on plane. So this will go into the refrigerator until tomorrow, and I will show you what we have then. Here are 3 types of aspic. They seem to have done well in this. I'm not 100% sure I can get these out in one piece, but I'm gonna try. So here we go. Oh, those ones went nicely. Beautiful. Okay, let's just take a moment to pause and appreciate silicone baking trays. Where did that go? Maybe I spoke too soon. Okay. There we go. Here we go. Look at those. You know, I am quite sure that I have seen more beautiful food in my lifetime, but I am quite pleased with how these turned out. So, well, at least visually. So I'm gonna try them. Look at that consistency. That's very nice. It's light and refreshing and salty and cool. Fantastic for what is, without question, a ridiculously hot day. And I'm gonna try the Boeuf en gelée, which is just pulled beef in a beef aspic. I really like that one. Okay, and here is our Oeuf en gelée. And to be honest, this mold isn't quite big enough for this, but we're gonna roll with it. Nice soft center to the yolk. Oh, that's perfect. Here we go. I like it. I like it a lot. I still think this one is my favorite, but that is fantastic. If you give it a try, let me know what you think, and please share what you might want to add into something like this. I know sometimes it's shrimp, sometimes there are so many options. What is your idea of a good way to use aspic for a cool meal on a hot day?